Welcome to episode 6 of the YMB and BTC podcast. Our chat today is a bit longer, but it will definitely be worth your time. We begin with a discussion about Bitcoin exchanges and the difficulties people often face when trying to obtain cryptocurrency for the first time. Tim complains because banks are fined just weeks' worth of profit while Bitcoin entrepreneurs like Charlie Shrem have been arrested. Our closing conversation turns even more serious and somewhat philosophical. We express our concerns about regulators who focus only on preventing the bad, and the fact that our world often forgets to encourage good things. Stick around for that and much more. We're three again today: Tim Baker, John Stuart, and Daniel Brown. Here we go. I've just been thinking how recently it seems like anytime I talk to someone or if I write something, I mean not every single time, but I find myself saying fairly often that one of the biggest barriers to entry for Bitcoin right now is simply obtaining Bitcoins, finding a way to buy them. I'm not saying it's impossible, but really that's the hardest part to get started with it, because the way things are now, I mean, there are exchanges. I mean, it depends where you live too. I'm sure this varies a lot from place to place, but the exchanges that are there now, sometimes they're hard to set up. I know I use Coinbase, and in one way it's really convenient because they just link straight to your bank account and it is really easy, but I also, for a long time, I was waiting 4 days to get any Bitcoins that I bought from them, just because they want to be secure. They want to make sure that the payments go through, and so they wait 4 days unless you verify your identity, and that's something. It's difficult in some cases. For me, it took a while before I was actually able to get that to work. But even when it does work, some people just don't want to reveal their identity and stuff like that. So I guess I was just thinking how it's definitely possible to buy Bitcoins. It's just one of the hardest things about it right now.
Yeah, I'd say here in the U.S. it's not really hard to get Bitcoin per se, as long as you have a bank account, which I think most people do. I guess not a ton of younger people do, but I think the majority of people do. The only place where you're going to really run into problems is maybe people who are working under the table who really don't want to use bank accounts, because then that leaves, or that could cost them if they get audited, or if you're homeless or something like that, where that's where Bitcoin's great. It'll help you a lot because you can kind of be your own bank. But then that's going to be a little bit of a problem, because whenever you buy from places like Coinbase or stuff like that, they want a proof of address there, which it might be a billing statement, as well as an ID, and then the way they make you pay. Now, Mt. Gox used to have Dwolla, but I don't know what they do now. But now Coinbase, they take it just right out of your bank account, so it's not really anonymous at all, but it works for me. But the only real problem in the U.S. is if you want to buy them anonymously, because like I'm saying with Coinbase, it goes right from your bank account, so there's no real hiding who you are unless you maybe put the Bitcoins through a mixer or something like that. But if you want to be anonymous, the only thing I can really think of is local Bitcoins, but then you're kind of looking, I mean, you're meeting face to face with somebody, but I mean, that's definitely more anonymous than having your address and everything out there for just buying the Bitcoins. That's something that can get traced back to you.
I mean, you're right. Coinbase isn't that difficult, especially if you're in the US and if you don't care about anonymity. But what I was thinking is just that it takes at least 4 days to get started. In fact, like one of their wait times is 30 days to get fully verified. So, I mean, you can buy them before that, but you can't be fully verified before that. So, I mean, it's just, you're right. It's not physically difficult, but it's just more, I guess you just have to wait, and that's time consuming. And then when it comes to local Bitcoins, again, it's not like impossible. It's totally doable. It's just compared to the rest of Bitcoin, it's one of the hardest things about it is buying Bitcoins and local Bitcoins. You can do it. It's just you have to find someone that you trust. You have to find a payment method that works for you. Things like that. And the fees are generally pretty high on local Bitcoins. So I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying compared to the rest of Bitcoin, it's one of the hardest things. I think. I don't know.
Yeah, I would have bought Bitcoin a lot earlier than I did if it had been easier. I guess it's not as much that it was hard. There are just a lot of things that you have to do. Like you don't just get on your computer and click something. You kind of have to do a little bit more than that. And so I'm naturally being a procrastinator. It took me a while to actually buy Bitcoin, which is unfortunate because the price had started going up. And then, well, I use Coinbase now most of the time, but whenever I first got Bitcoin, I don't know if Coinbase had started yet, or at least if it had, I didn't know about it. So I was trying to go through Mt. Gox, and then of course, right at the time I was trying to get it is whenever they ended up making it impossible to get money in or out of Gox. So I mean, you remember that, Daniel, because you ended up buying Bitcoin and I paid you back for it later. That was the first time I bought Bitcoin.
Yeah, that is the perfect example. It's not quite as difficult now, but that is generally what it was like. I mean, you had to sign up with Mt. Gox, but then you had to send verification to Mt. Gox, and then the easiest way to get money into Mt. Gox was, at the time, it was through Dwolla, which you can't do anymore, but so we had to sign up for Dwolla, and we had to verify with Dwolla as well, and send them identification documents. And that took, I remember it took probably 3 days to verify with Mt. Gox and 3 days to verify with Dwolla. And that, yeah, you're right, the price went up several dollars. I mean, yeah, several dollars is nothing now, but at the time it was probably, I don't know, $25 to $35 in a few days. And that is true, that's a cost. And it's not exactly like that still, but it's just generally not the easiest thing to do. And I remember, Tim, the first time you bought, you did an even more kind of complicated way, right?
Yeah, that was when I was buying through BitInstant, which that was just really kind of confusing. And I know I've mentioned it on here before, but it's like I would go on BitInstant and you'd put in your address, so I'd put in something from Bitcoin QT, and then you'd put that in, and you'd put in how much you wanted to buy, so you had all these different specifics, so it was like, okay, I'm going to buy 2, and then it'd give you a percentage, like what you're going to have to pay. There were a bunch of different fees, because it was going through so many different people. I think there was a flat, like $3.95 for somebody, then there was a percentage fee for somebody else, then there was, I think, something else, because it was going through like 3 people. But anyway, then you'd print up something, they'd email you the statement, and you'd have a few days to make the payment before it got canceled. But you'd have to go to a MoneyGram place. Closest place to me was a Shop and Save, but no one really knew how to use the MoneyGram thing for what I was doing. Not too many people used it, it seemed like there. Like, they didn't have a lot of customers coming in to ask to use it, because they always seemed like, yeah, we don't know how exactly to do this, but the thing you printed out had these numbers in these boxes that you put in to help for ZipZap, who it was going through, to identify the order that was happening, so that they'd make sure to send the Bitcoins to the right account. So that was the biggest problem with the people at Shop and Save, was because the numbers, there were a few different numbers, but you only wanted to put in one, and I wasn't entirely sure, and they had no idea. So, and they wouldn't really want to listen to me if I pointed to something, because I would also say I didn't know. But most of the time, the times that I went to there and did that, it took about half an hour, 40 minutes just to get one payment through. Except, I mean, one time there was this older lady there who knew how to do it, so we got it done in maybe 20 minutes, but most of the time it was younger people who really didn't have that great of an idea, so it was a little bit, it was kind of a waste of time, but not a waste of time, but it used up a lot more time than like it does now for just buying on Coinbase.
Right. Well, that's the thing with that. I do remember there was several different payment processors, and you had to go through all of them, really, and pay fees. Yeah. Let me ask you this, Tim. Do you know were you able to place the order and receive the Bitcoins on the same day?
Yeah, once I got the order, the Bitcoins were normally back in my account within an hour. I mean, sometimes before I even got home. But it went pretty quick once you got it set up. ZipZap was pretty good on that.
Okay. So, I mean, it might be complicated, but that would be one of the faster ways to go about it.
Yeah. I don't remember exactly when I first heard about Bitcoin, but I'm sure I probably wanted to get some of it pretty much right after I heard about it. Tim, do you remember how we heard about it? I figure you might know because we usually end up telling each other about this kind of stuff. Because I don't really remember how I even found out about Bitcoin now that I think about it.
Yeah, the best I can remember, I heard it through Adam Kokesh from Adam vs. the Man, his podcast and YouTube channel. I may have heard it in passing from something else, and then maybe a few days later he had he did a 3-hour daily podcast, and then he put up like a 40-minute video, and he was talking to Shrem from BitInstant and the Bitcoin Foundation actually too, and they were talking about Bitcoin and its possibilities for changing things and for its, I guess, just anonymity and its ability to be used for things that the government doesn't want. So people complain or kind of want to demonize Bitcoin as this thing that's just pushing people away because it can be used for drugs or things like that. It's like that's kind of how I got interested in it. It was because Adam Kokesh was talking about like, oh, look, here's this thing that you can kind of use to just go around the government's laws about things because it's just like it's your money and they can't really stop it. I don't know, maybe that's the way to reach blossoming libertarians. Yeah, I don't really remember how I brought it up to you. I don't know if I maybe just sent you a message, Daniel, and was like, hey, look, here's this new kind of money or currency that the government doesn't control.
Yeah, it's really weird. I just realized that I have no memory of hearing about it for the first time. I've never really thought about it before. I figured it was probably from Adam Kokesh or something like that.
I remember, I mean, Tim and I would do breakfast every week, and it was just at breakfast that he told me about it. But at the time, it took me a few weeks before I got around to actually looking into it. And then I thought, I could buy some. It was at probably like $14-15. It was really because of that, because of the BitInstant and ZipZap and all that stuff. I just didn't feel like going through all that. Then I remember a few weeks or months later, you told us how it was at like 25. I'm like, what? And I did some work on the faucets just to get a little bit of dust. And I don't remember too much about the article, but I was reading something and it basically said they didn't really trust Bitcoin for whatever reasons, and in general, I just wasn't too informed, and I said, I don't really care much about Bitcoin. I gave up on it, and I actually sent all that dust I had, I sent it to Tim, and said, here, you can have it, I'm done. But then later it went up higher to $33, and that's when I did finally buy. I think, I have records, I think the first purchase was, I spent $100, I got 3.68 and some dust. So that's a pretty good rate. I guess that's less than $30. Less than 33, I guess.
Yeah, it was definitely months for me in between hearing about it and actually getting it. Mostly because, well, yeah, like you said, there was a lot less information on it early on, and I didn't know enough about it to trust it that much, and I didn't really have that high of expectations for it either. So I just there wasn't a whole lot that was making me want to get it. And then when it finally started getting up more past like 30, I started really wanting to get it. And then all that stuff happened with Gox, and I didn't end up getting it till it was about $70 for a Bitcoin. I think that's what I paid.
Oh, right. I do remember that. Was that after it crashed that you bought it?
Yeah, I think it was actually. I remember, I was kind of really worried about getting it then, but I knew if I was gonna get some that I had to do it then. Like, I don't know, it was up at like 200, and then it crashed down to about 70. And it was one of those points where it was like, it's either gonna keep going down, or it's gonna go back up. So, I don't know, I just kind of took the leap and got some, and it ended up being a pretty good decision.
Yeah, I ended up selling all my cheap $20 Bitcoin at like 80 or 85 as it was going up to that $260 spike. And then I was like, oh, it probably isn't going to go any higher. It's at 80. So I was like, oh, I better sell it before it drops. And then it just kept on going up, and I kept on buying it as it went up, and then it dropped below what I had been paying for it when it was up around like 150. So I really didn't get out of that too well.
Yeah, as it was going up, like this fall, and I guess like into winter, whenever it started first getting up into the really high triple digits, I was selling it like incrementally, and now I'm trying to buy it all back in small amounts.
Yeah, I remember exactly where I was too when it crashed. I remember reading about Gox sort of lagging up and going down. I was in a gas station reading on my phone. I was reading on the IRC channel once and talking to people, trying to figure out what was happening, and I thought about selling at 200 or something like that because I felt like it was going down, but I guess the reason I didn't is because I wasn't able to get through to Gox, so I just had to sit there and wait out the crash, which it wasn't all bad, because obviously in the end it's fine now. But the advantage would have been if I was able to sell, I would have been able to buy even more when it dropped back to 70 or whatever.
I haven't read about them too much, but I mean, we're talking about how easy it could be to get them, or the ease of access for Bitcoins, but have either one of you read too much or really at all about the Bitcoin ATMs or Bitcoin almost like vending machines that they're putting out? I've heard a little bit from Let's Talk Bitcoins, but their interviews for some of the people, but I haven't heard too much.
Yeah, right. I forgot about that. I did mean to bring that up because of this whole exchange thing. That is something that would be pretty convenient, just to have a place where you can deposit cash, and especially if it was anonymous. I don't know if they actually are. I've never used one, but I mean, an ATM would be great because it would be like your MoneyGram thing, Tim, but it would be automated. You wouldn't have to deal with these 18-year-old kids who don't know how to type in a number.
I mean, I'm about 90% sure that any of those ATMs, I know at least the ones that I heard about, they would use a thumbprint. Like, you'd set up all your information at first, and you'd put in like your name, probably some other credentials, I don't know, but then you use your thumbprint to validate you, and then from then on, anytime you wanted to buy Bitcoin, you could just use your thumbprint to validate that it was you and not a terrorist or something. Because anytime they do any of this stuff where it's you're being a money exchanger, they have these know your customer laws and regulations, because obviously if we don't know every single person who's using money, 9/11 is just going to happen again somehow, just automatically, I guess. But this stuff at the with the MoneyGram in ZipZap, like BitInstant, wasn't anonymous at all. I had to, like, I put in my information online, and then I had to show my ID and everything at Shop and Save. So it wasn't any more anonymous than what I'm doing now through Coinbase. We're talking about how easy it is to get here, but listening to Andreas on Let's Talk Bitcoin all the time, I do try to remind myself to think about what he calls the other 6 billion, which is the people who aren't in the U.S., the people who are in places where, it's scary to think about, but the way the government messes with the money is even worse than the U.S., how our money is messed with. But it's those people that are going to benefit so much from Bitcoin, but it's also those people that it's harder to get Bitcoin, whether because they don't have bank accounts because they can't get them, or they don't trust them, or there might just be really bad currency controls. Like, I know China was having that problem before. I mean, I know they have really bad or really strict currency controls. Now they let them use Bitcoin now, but we heard they stopped, I don't know if it was banks or just large companies from trading in them or from holding stuff in it. But also, I think places like the desert or less populated areas in like Africa or places like that where it's easier to travel with, it's safer to travel with, you don't have to change your money from different currencies, you can kind of just carry it in Bitcoin. It takes up almost no room. I mean, even if you're using paper wallets, it's one piece of paper could hold thousands of dollars, but if you're not using it, then it's just on your cell phone or on a laptop. But like I was saying, it's the people who need it the most. How do people who are out in more of a wilderness area, or, I mean, at that point, maybe they can't really use it because there isn't that great of an internet connection, but besides something like local Bitcoins or just face-to-face transactions like that, I don't know of too many other things of how they could get that. Maybe, I don't know if anyone listens, if they could email one of us or, I don't know, comment, and they could let us know, maybe, if there was anything better.
I remember hearing people talk about some pretty popular payment processor in Africa, and it was linked to their cell phone accounts, and it's pretty new, but there was supposed to be a pretty efficient way to use Bitcoin was coming.
My guess is that it's still probably easiest to get Bitcoin in America or Europe, I guess, and maybe even like Canada. Any place like considered like the Western world, I guess, is still probably the easiest, just because we have the most like infrastructure. Now, we probably don't need Bitcoin as much as somebody like in Cyprus. They probably have a lot more need for it than we do, but I feel like it's probably still easier to get it here.
We're talking about how hard it can be to just the annoyance of regulation in money exchanges, especially for Bitcoin, but there's this article in Forbes, which I kind of wanted to bring up whenever it first came to my attention. It was because of a Facebook photo, I guess it was, being shared about how Trem at BitInstant got arrested, but HSBC was only fined, and it's $1.9 billion, so I mean, it's quite a bit, but for a bank of HSBC's size, I'd say that's probably not a ton of money, but both of them they're being attacked because of money laundering, but, I mean, it is my fault that the bank was proven to be money laundering, but really the $1.9 billion fine isn't because they were money laundering. That hasn't been proven or really looked into anymore. It's that they were not, I guess I'll just read what it says, that you'll recall that HSBC was hit with $1.9 billion in fines over allegations about money laundering. You will also have noted that no one ever actually did prove that it shifted around money for Mexican drug dealers and all the rest. Rather, that its internal documentation processes were inadequate to show that it had not been doing so. It was not a $1.9 billion fine for laundering money. It was a $1.9 billion fine for not following the regulations about how to monitor and or prevent money laundering. So that kind of just shows where the government gets into just regular banking, even though they won't come down as hard on them because they're in bed together. That I kind of, most of the time I just see banks as just another arm of the government, and when a government finds the banks, it's kind of just moving money from its left hand to its right hand. But even with them, it's like you have to prove that you're innocent. It's not that they have to prove that you're guilty. It's just you have to prove that you're not innocent, or that you are innocent. Also, I don't really have that much of a problem with money laundering per se, because it's another one of these crimes where it's like if the government didn't outlaw certain things, or if it just didn't exist, that's one of those crimes that wouldn't exist, because most of the time when you're laundering money, you're not doing it because you're trying to hide that, you're making money on the side stripping or something like that. It's mostly just to deal with money you've gotten from drug trade. Now, I mean, sometimes there's stuff with like murders, but definitely the drug trade worldwide is quite a bit larger than the murder for hire trade. So I don't really frown upon money laundering as just this evil, terrible thing, but I mean, I don't like if they were really doing this for Mexican drug cartels, only because those drug cartels are known for their propensity for violence and for solving things through violence, which, I mean, that's kind of all they're left with, because they don't have any access to courts or anything like that. But that's really the only problem I would have, is that it involved people who are normally very violent. I do think the article brings up a good point in talking about all these regulations, and you see that in these so many businesses that can't start, but some Bitcoin businesses still do, but then they run into problems when they have to make sure they don't kind of just drown in all this regulation, because it does cost so much just to hire someone, because we've gotten to where you have to prove that you're innocent instead of having them have to prove that you're guilty. So even though the bank is hit with a fine, that's not really unexpected to see a big corporate bank just hit with a fine, while Bitcoin, a founder there, is arrested for basically what seems to be the same thing. Although with Shrem, they are saying that they have proof that he did it, but I tend to not really trust stuff like that, because they say they have proof for stuff all the time, and they don't. This is interesting. At the end of that article, it says that, again, this is from the Forbes article, essentially, we can have a banking system with the current rules and regulations about money laundering, or we can have a banking system that can handle remittances into Somalia. What we cannot have is both, for the regulations are too expensive to allow the sending of small remittances into Somalia. And I know a lot of people like Bitcoin because it is so easy to just send little amounts, and for myself, I'm a lot more likely to donate to something, really just anything, even if I don't care about it that much, if where the person lists how you can donate to their thing, they say, well, you can donate through PayPal or credit cards, or you could just send Bitcoin to this address right here. And it's so much easier, and it's so much nicer, and I can know that even if I'm just sending like $10, they'll get most of that. And if I'm sending them a lot more money, again, they'll get most of that too, where if I use PayPal or a credit card, a lot of that's going to just go to paying for it to get there. So I think if the government really got involved and got its claws into Bitcoin, and everyone was trying to follow all these different rules and regulations, we're going to lose that ability to just send $5 and have that person actually get any kind of money out of it, because it's just going to cost too much, and the price of sending money is just going to have to go up to cover that.
That's interesting. What's the date on this article again?
August 8th, 2013.
Now, can you read that sentence or two about we have an option about sending remittances to Somalia, or we can't have both? Can you read that again?
Yeah, I can repeat it. And this is from Forbes. The article name is HSBC's $1.9 billion money laundering fine and the Somalian cost of bank regulation, if anyone wants to go out there and find that. It's written by Tim Worstall. What I said before that he wrote was, essentially, we can have a banking system with the current rules and regulations about money laundering, or we can have a banking system that can handle remittances into Somalia. What we cannot have is both, for the regulations are too expensive to allow the sending of small remittances into Somalia. So what he's saying is that, it's not feasible for banks to send money through there because of all the little regulations that they have to do, not because there's necessarily taxes on this stuff. That's a different issue, but just because of all the little, they have to make sure they record everything, so they have to hire more people to keep track of that, because they need to make sure they're not doing anything wrong, or they might get hit with one of these big fines. And the person who wrote the article is saying all this to say that that's that's why they got the fine, was because they didn't keep close enough track for it. He's not really commenting on whether or not they were laundering money. He's more commenting on the fact that this fine doesn't really even matter if they laundered the money or not. The only reason why they got the fine was because they didn't have enough information to say that they weren't laundering money. They couldn't prove that they weren't doing it.
It's really interesting. I don't know, have either of you listened to the hearings on Bitcoin just in the last week that are going on in New York? They had a little bit on Let's Talk Bitcoin and a little bit on the Mad Money Machine. The interesting part is that they brought up almost the exact same dilemma about basically what they said is we can either prevent money laundering or encourage innovation. And if the choice was between those two, the guy who was leading the debates, he just assumed it. Well, he asked them, but he thought that everyone would agree that if the choice was between preventing money laundering and encouraging innovation, that everyone would just automatically say, oh, if we only have those two options, we definitely want to prevent money laundering. And he said something about it's better to prevent terrorism than even if 1,000 flowers would bloom in innovation or something like that. And yeah, it's almost the exact same dilemma. And it's interesting because he just assumed that everyone would say, we don't want money laundering, while you just said that you don't even believe money laundering really exists. And I think I would agree. It depends exactly what you mean. And I won't give a full opinion on that, but it's just interesting how contrasting those ideas are.
Yeah, he did say a couple times at the beginning, he kept repeating and saying that, well, I don't think anyone would want to support, or not want to support, would rather have risked the chance of having money laundering and not innovation, where I'm like, yeah, I would. I'd rather have innovation versus money laundering. But he did eventually say that he didn't think anyone here, which I'm guessing he meant the people there representing Bitcoin. And it was I don't know if he was a judge or just the guy who was kind of representing the government from New York. He was the one who was saying that he would rather squash 100 innovations than risk having money laundering going on, supporting 9/11.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure 9/11 did come up.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like going back to what you were saying, Tim, earlier about how like you don't really think that there is such a thing as money laundering. It's like, well, what constitutes money laundering? So I guess it's basically just trying to say that you got your money from somewhere that you didn't so that it looks legitimate. I mean, that could be like, there are probably lots of things that happen on a daily basis that could be considered money laundering.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different rules and regulations that you're basically, just about every single American breaks some of these things every single day just with your normal financial transactions. But Wikipedia says that money laundering is simply just like, it's concealing your, the way you're getting money. And I mean, that's not the best definition because, like I was saying before about, you can conceal where you're getting your money from, but whenever you're doing money laundering, it's normally because it's something illegal, not because it's something embarrassing for your family or something like that. It's where you're trying to hide it from the government, not from your family or your church or something like that. And it seems like at least that more it's the government's going after money laundering because it's like, we want our tax money, give it to us, not that they actually care that you did something wrong, where, I mean, they go after drugs, but that more has to do with the amount of money that they can get doing that versus that they really want to protect people.
I mean, when you think about it, the only reason for even having a term for money laundering is like you said, to get taxes, because by that Wikipedia definition, to conceal the source of money, when have you ever accepted money from someone and said, I need to know where you got this money from? Like, that's such an inconsequential thing to any kind of transaction. The only reason that you would need to know that is for tax purposes. So yeah, like, it's kind of a made up thing, money laundering.
Well, one thing, people always do mention terrorism too, and they want to make sure that, that the banks aren't sending money to terrorists. I guess not the banks, but the people who use the banks are not funding terrorism, which, on the one hand, it's a legitimate concern because we really don't want people sending money to people who are going to kill people. But does that really, is that going to stop when you put all these regulations on the banks and everything? Is that going to stop people from asking other people or from actually sending money to people to kill people? I mean, is that going to stop because of AML regulations?
I guess before I start saying this, I should, I'm not saying to go donate money to terrorism. I think that's still wrong and evil too, but they complain about money laundering. It's going to be used to perpetrate 9/11 again, but they're like, no, but you have to pay your taxes so that we can go murder those people over there because we need to support our military because our military's good and it's so much different whenever they murder people versus whenever they come and murder us. You're still paying for someone to murder somebody else. But when it's for the U.S. military, it's like, no, that's good and that's righteous. And we have these people who are like, I love my country and I love my military and I love my police but I don't like my government. I hate my government, but the military is just great. And it's just, that has nothing to do with the rest of the government. It's just, they're great. And as long as you put on the uniform in the United States of America, it's fine to murder, rape, steal, pillage, whatever, because that's good. We are God's country, so anything we do is pure and right.
Yeah, that's true. That's more of a political thing than anything financial, but it is true that what we call terrorism from the Middle East is really not that different from what we do to the Middle East. So
the thing that makes me really ticked off about this, though, is the thing about rather preventing terrorism than allowing for innovation. It's kind of like a false dichotomy to begin with, but it seems like people are so much this goes across the board in all areas of life. It seems like people are so much more inclined to I don't know, trying to fight against bad things than just trying to do good things instead.
Yeah, you and I, John, we've talked about this before, where it's, why is the focus whenever something wrong happens, it's like, we have to punish this person, not, okay, we need to help this person now, because that would probably do more good, I would think.
Exactly. And this isn't a perfect correlation to this, but I was watching this interview with a guy yesterday, a songwriter, and he was actually quoting somebody else, and I can't remember who it is, and I'm going to butcher the quote because I don't remember it. But he was saying that people would rather lie to their kids about the world being screwed up than trying to fix the fact that it's screwed up so their kids don't have to live in a screwed up world. They just want them to not know that it's screwed up instead of trying to make it not screwed up. It's not a perfect quote for this situation, but it kind of gets at that idea that people always have to focus on the negative side instead of trying to destroy something bad. Why don't you try to do something good?
It's interesting because I think that relates to something that I was thinking about just within the past day or two. It's almost like thinking about the idea that in America we're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, because we would rather assume that you're innocent and let you do whatever you want. I mean, that's not how it works anymore, but it's supposed to be that we would rather do something good for you and let you be free than do something bad or let you go to prison when you might not be guilty. I I think that idea is an example of doing something good instead of focusing on preventing something bad. The reason I was thinking about this is actually because of those anti-money laundering regulations. The fact that they impose those regulations, or any regulation really, it's almost as if they assume, and on the one hand, it is true that I believe people are sinful at heart, and yeah, of course there's gonna be bad things happening in the world, but to put regulations on that is an example of preventing the bad instead of encouraging and supporting the good. And you're right, it's probably not the best way to go about things, because if you only prevent the bad, then nothing good ever gets done.
Yeah, it's kind of that thing where you don't, I don't know, I guess this is like a thing that gets talked a lot about in like schools and stuff with like different rules and things. They say that you won't think to break the rules until somebody tells you it's a rule. And I think you get a lot farther trying to promote honest business than punish bad business.
The You, Me, and Bitcoin podcast is funded in part by listeners like you. If you're able and willing, head over to youmeandbtc.com and find the tipping address for this episode. We're also on the lookout for sponsors, so if you have a product or service, contact me, Daniel at youmeandbtc.com.
I guess I should bring this up now, though, too, because like even if we weren't looking at this as something where it's like it's kind of a stupid way to go through life, where you're like, well, we could have this wonderful new thing, but well, somebody might use it for bad. So for all the hundreds of good uses, we'll just those don't matter. If there's a few bad uses or that we could see might happen, we just kind of not let that happen. Even if we were looking at it where, okay, we don't want to do that, how many times does terrorism actually happen? Like the percentages, it's like 1,040 times more likely to be killed in a car accident than it is to be killed by a terrorist attack. I mean, it's like 9 times more likely to die, to suffocate in your own vomit while you sleep than to be killed in a terrorist attack. So, but I don't see these things being like, well, we shouldn't have these things because someone might die in a car crash or something like that, but because they've kind of latched onto this terrorism thing and they can kind of just use that as a catch-all for anything they don't want, well, that's bad because, well, terrorists. Well, what would terrorists do? It doesn't matter, just terrorists, 9/11, just shut up, you know what I mean? So it almost just becomes this thing, just whatever happens, just say 9/11 and it goes away, or you say, well, the Patriot Act, yeah, we used to think that was bad, but 9/11 changed everything. We need stuff now. We need to indefinitely detain people and everything like that.
I remember an episode of Family Guy where Lois ran for mayor or something, and she like got up on stage and like she's tried to say something and everybody was kind of ignoring her, and then she mentioned 9/11 and everybody looked at her. Then she like paused and she's like 9/11 and everybody cheered, and then she paused again. She's like 9/11. Everybody keeps cheering for her, and then I don't know, she probably wins or something.
So the numbers for 9/11, isn't it like 3,000 people died or something like that? But like how many people, I don't know, how many people commit suicide every day? Even just like in one city. So let's say New York, because that's where 9/11 happened. How many people commit suicide in New York per day?
I mean, from some stuff I'm finding on the internet, it's like 22 veterans kill themselves every day, and that's not just veterans from the recent wars, that's older ones too, but that's just veterans, that's not other people. And something else I found, it was like on a normal day, someone kills himself every 17 minutes, but even then, I think that might be lowballing it a little bit from other things that I've heard. But, I mean, I don't know. I don't have any idea.
I mean, this goes back to what I was saying about trying to do good instead of punish evil. Instead of trying to prevent this terrorist attack that happens, like, you have more chance of dying in it by choking on your own vomit by 9 times. Instead of trying to prevent that, why don't we try to help people who want to commit suicide, give them a reason to live? I think you'd save, like, a lot more people that way.
Well, I mean, all these questions of good and evil and things like that are obviously huge questions, and obviously none of us three has answers that are going to solve all of our problems. But it is definitely true that yeah, there are problems that are neglected, like suicide or all these other 6 billion that are living in completely oppressive countries. Yeah, you're right. It is important to focus on helping them rather than worry about our own safety. This is another thing that I was just thinking about. I remember in those hearings, they kept saying, like, we want to make all these regulations to help bring jobs to New York. We don't want to push them overseas. We want New York to be profitable. As if giving jobs to other people was a bad thing. They're afraid of giving jobs to China, and that's like, people talk about that all the time. We don't want to push jobs overseas. We don't want to do that. Why? I thought jobs were a good thing. I mean, yeah, we want to create more jobs total, but they talk as if it's a bad thing that people in China are working.
Well, I think the thing, Daniel, with the jobs keeping in America is because everyone, keep jobs in America. I only buy American made, but they only care about the people. If it is really them caring, they only care about the people in this little geographic area. They're not thinking of themselves as humans. They're still stuck in that. A lot of people think of themselves as Americans, not human beings.
That's exactly what I'm saying. You're right. Americans are so selfish. They want all the jobs to come to America, and they want to raise the minimum wage.
I mean, you're better off working for minimum wage at McDonald's in America than you are working overseas somewhere.
Exactly.
Doing outsourced work for American businesses.
Exactly. And I've heard, I don't know where this number comes from, but I've heard something like the poverty line in some ways is $2 a day. And we're concerned about $10 an hour. That, to me, that's insanely selfish.
I don't really think it's not really selfish necessarily. I don't really know that it's so much selfish. It's stupid. I mean, some people, they're not worth, the work they can put out is not worth $10 a day. And then you take something like that away from them with the minimum wage, and they can't get a job anywhere really to support themselves. And then people say, well, they can't support themselves anyway on anything. But like what you're talking about, it's the living wage and the standard of living in America is so much higher than other places. People could live on a lot less than they do. But I mean, the best example I can think of is mentally challenged, or I don't even know if that's the politically correct way of talking about it. But people have mental handicaps. A lot of times they might be worth $3 for like the work they do, or something like that, it's fine. It's just, but then you have these minimum wage jobs and it's $10 an hour, but they're not worth, the work they can do is not worth $10 a day. It's great for them to be out working. It gives them something to do. The studies show that they do better with that. It gets them out socializing. It lets them feel some independence. But an employer you can't expect them to pay that person $10 an hour because they're not worth the work they're doing an hour is not worth anything near that. And then you start talking about stuff in other countries, and it's not a situation I want to be in. I don't want to have to work in a sweatshop or anything like that. But if the person there is working in the sweatshop, that means that unless for some strange reason they were forced to work in that with a gun at their head, that's the best option for them. I mean, if it's a choice between living or dying or supporting their family or not supporting their family, that's still a choice, and you're not going to help that by raising the minimum wage or by forcing sweatshops out of business. I mean, I'm going to steal a bit from a comedian here, but he talks about how he gets annoyed about people who want to not ban things, but they want to boycott things. So it's like if he was given a story about one time when he was in the store and this younger guy came up to him. He's like, "Hey, you see those shoes you're wearing, man? People who make those shoes, they work for 25 cents a day." He's like, "Well, they should probably get a better job. That sounds like that job sucks." And then he's like, "But man, they gotta feed their family. They got a family to support." He's like, "Well, that sounds like a pretty bad decision to start having a family when you're making 25 cents a day, doesn't it?" So I guess, even though it sounds terrible to say, I'm kind of defending sweatshops, but it's like, as long as you're not forced to do something, in the sense of being forced, not that you'll lose your job, but that they'll kill you or something like that. As long as you're not forced to do it, then that's fine. You still have a choice to do it. I got in a little bit of an argument with my family over Christmas because we were driving over to my grandparents to have lunch, and I think someone said something like, "Well, that's good that some of these," I forget if it was Walmart or someone, their employees don't have to work that day or something. I'm like, no, this isn't a moral thing. It's, if they want to work, then they can work, and if they don't want to work, then they'll get fired. And I mean, some people don't celebrate Christmas. Some people would rather take some extra money, some overtime pay to make more money because they need to make ends meet. But the people who don't, I mean, they have a choice. If they don't want to work that day, they can just stay home, and they'll probably get fired. They'll definitely get reprimanded somehow, but it's up to them. And someone from my family, probably my sister, I think it was my sister, said like, "No, but they don't have any other option." And I'm like, well, they have an option. I mean, living versus dying is still an option. It's not a good option. I'm not saying that I want someone putting that option, but that's still an option. That's still a human choice. So even if it's well-intentioned, the minimum wage is saying, okay, I'm going to take this person that, I mean, maybe they're worth $10 an hour. Maybe the company's underpaying them, no, I don't really believe in underpaying. It's just whatever you get paid. You can't be overpaid. You can't be underpaid. It's whatever the company decides to. There isn't, again, it's not a moral issue, but someone who their work for the company is only worth $4 or $5 an hour, and you're going to say, well, I'm going to make sure that this person, they get paid $10 an hour, because then they'll get that money. But they won't get that money. If they're only worth $4 or $5 an hour, the company's going to fire them. And they're not going to get any money then. That's why, like, you go to these, I've never seen one of these things in my life, but it's, you go to a gas station, it's all self-serve. They used to have people pumping gas, but with the minimum wage laws, that kind of went away. Same thing with, I know it was a local thing around here, at least I think it was local. I don't know if it was countrywide, but the, fast food workers strikes, maybe that was nationwide, but you know what a fast food worker on an $11, $10 living wage, as they call it, is going to be? It's going to be a robot who just makes everything. You're going to have a guy there who helps to make sure the robot runs, but you're not going to have these other people. Now, the robot's going to be really expensive, but he's going to pay himself off with not having to take breaks, not having to get paid $11 an hour for something that isn't worth $11 an hour.
Just in general, I think I would agree. I have a hard time stating my political opinions definitively because I like to be clear that I don't know. Who knows? I can't be sure about anything. But in general, I think I would agree with you. I definitely agree that labor should be part of the free market, that people should get paid whatever they're willing to pay them, and if someone's willing to work for 50 cents a day, are we saying it should be illegal? If someone is that desperate that they need 50 cents a day, and all of a sudden it's illegal for them to do that?
I think, Daniel, even just you saying you don't know, that's not that you're kind of giving I wouldn't consider it a political opinion, just like I don't have a political opinion because I don't really think that politics really work, but just you saying you don't know, that's an opinion. That's saying that you don't know how to plan these things. It's the people who say that they do know how to run these things. They do know how people work. They do know how the economy needs to be run. Those are the kind of people who I'm against. Those are the kind of people who have these Keynesian ideas of planning an economy with a bunch of people that they don't know how they're going to react and how they're going to work, but they do say they do know. So I think basically all of our opinion is, I don't know how to run this. I don't know what each company is going to want, so we should just let them do what they want to do. As long as they're not harming anyone or forcing anyone to do something, then they're fine.
Yeah, I mean, saying that you don't know is it's not refusing to make a choice. I mean, just going back to this, like saying somebody working for 50 cents a day, it's basically like making it illegal by having a minimum wage. If you think about it, you could probably eat a decent amount of food for like $10 a day, wouldn't you say? Like breakfast, lunch, and dinner at like McDonald's.
Yeah, be careful with McDonald's, because as soon as you say that, everyone's going to complain that it's not healthy. But yeah, finish your argument.
Well, I'm just talking about eating to survive. So say you're a homeless guy, and we're just gonna, I mean, there's all kinds of stereotypes about homeless people not spending money honestly and stuff like that. So let's just assume that you're legitimately homeless, and you want money to buy food so you can stay alive. Like, if you can eat for $10 a day, I think there are a lot of businesses out there that would almost just give you $10 a day because it's so small out of what they make.
So yeah, I mean, if there is someone who has no other marketable skills besides being able to flip a hamburger, then that's good. They're going to have to work on that. And then if you tell me that they can't live on that, what am I supposed to do? I can't, because they're not going to get a job. You can't force someone to pay them more without there being other repercussions other places. They're just going to get fired. And I'm not saying that I hope the person dies, or I'm not saying that I wouldn't help them or give them money. If I saw them, I try to, if I see someone that's in need, I try to help them out and give them a little bit of something.
Yeah, I mean, if you hate that job so much that you're not willing to work at it for like $2 an hour so that you can buy food to live. I mean, if you hate it that much, then like it is a choice to die.
Yeah, so I'm not saying charity's bad. I'm just, like, if someone asks me for money, if I'm able to give them money, I think I should probably, and I think we should try to help the other people in this, other people who just aren't as well off as us, as long as you're not running yourself into poverty where then you can't help other people if other people do need it. But I've also seen, we're like working at a factory here where we live, that, I mean, it was hard work. I mean, it wasn't like physically hard, but it was, I mean, sometimes it was. It depended on what kind of job you got that day, but it was boring. It was monotonous. It was, I mean, for probably about a quarter of the time I was there, it was 8-hour days. And then for quite a bit of it, it was 10-hour days. And eventually they had us coming in on Saturdays too. So it was like 57-hour weeks of just manual labor, either whether that's just moving stuff in and out of machines and stuff. And I mean, it didn't make me tired in the sense of like exercising, but it's harder on your body. My wrists and everything would just ache. And there were guys there who have been doing it for 10 years, 20 years. Most of the guys there have been there at least a couple of years, and they were doing it to make money because they saw that for a job where you didn't need any experience and where most of the guys there were from prison or had been in prison, or there were a few guys there who were in prison at that time and were let out to work there. That was a pretty good $9.50 an hour, was a pretty good paying job for someone without any kind of any skills there. So, but they had to work hard to make money, and some people there were there because they had made bad decisions, or whether because they had been in prison or because they just wasted money. But some guys were there just trying to provide for their family and trying to just support their kids and stuff like that. I mean, and there was a little bit of complaining, but it wasn't like, oh, I hate it here, I need to... But it's kind of just the kind of complaining that I think you get most places where that's just how people deal with stress or not wanting to do something. I mean, most people don't like their job, so you're not really going to go someplace where you're not going to dislike it, but they knew they had to do it, so they came in every single day at 5 a.m., and some of those guys had to drive an hour and a half from, like, Ohio just to get to this job, to work from 5 a.m. to 3:30 p.m., then come back the next day, and they only had one full day off each week.
Yeah, I mean, working there has definitely been probably one of the better life experiences I've ever had. Just because, yeah, I mean, like you said, there's complaining, but I think you get that with any job. The difference is there's a huge difference between complaining and then quitting. I mean, if you complain but you still come into work every day, then it must not be that bad. I mean, working in a factory has, like, it's kind of showed me that, I don't know, I guess growing up in, like, middle class, like, privileged white American culture, everybody kind of has to have, like, this plan for their life, and you're like, well, what if something goes wrong and, like, I don't get this job that I'm planning to have, like, 5 years from now, that I don't even know, like, why in 5 years I'll be able to get this job, but I'm still planning my life around having it. Like, what happens if that goes wrong? And I don't know, working at the factory, it's kind of just, like, showed me that you can find something to do to make some kind of money to at least survive, and it's not going to be the end of the world. Like, you just do what you need to do.
That's an important point. What you just said, John, is just to at least survive. And that's part of the problem in America. People think that surviving includes a TV and some cable, a microwave, and a deck in your backyard, and a lawnmower. The standard of living in America is completely different than it is in the rest of the world. That's part of this whole minimum wage issue, is people think that you need a cell phone to survive. I'm not saying that I don't like my cell phone and I don't want my cell phone. I'm not saying I don't want you to have a cell phone, but it's not my responsibility to raise the minimum wage so that you can have cable TV. That's not my responsibility. It's politically, I don't think I have much of a responsibility at all to you. Morally, I would say I probably have a responsibility to encourage and support your life. So yeah, I'll do what I can to help you survive. If I can help you enjoy life, I think I should try to do that. But I think cable TV is more than people need. And yet there's probably, honestly, in the US, it would be real tough to find a house that doesn't have a TV. Most people have a car. I don't want people to think that I don't see the poverty. I know there's people who are genuinely in need, but there's also people who are living on the minimum wage and have cell phones and TV and everything and think they deserve more.
So, kind of tying this all together, back with what we were saying before, I think the minimum wage issue is a perfect example of what I was talking about before, where it's so much better. Instead of saying, you're not allowed to pay somebody this little, why don't we encourage people to treat their employees well?
Hey, that's amazing, and I think that's good, yeah.
Yeah, just encouraging people to start more jobs. We need more entrepreneurs just to get more occupations out there. It doesn't matter if it pays the minimum wage. I mean, it does now, but I wish it didn't. But I think even then that's a problem with the minimum wage, is it stops new businesses from happening. But that's what's great about Bitcoin right now, the Bitcoin economy. That Bitcoin economy is doing really good. There's a lot of different things you can do. There's a lot of things you can to work for in there, and you don't have to worry about minimum wage or stuff like that, at least right now. I mean, that, I guess a lot more of that is like freelance stuff, so there isn't like an hourly wage, but it's weird because I can see the Bitcoin economy and how much growth there is there and how great that looks, and then I look outside in the real world and it's like, oh, okay, this is here. It's just stagnant and there's not really that much going on to change it.
Yeah, I mean, right now, I think it's better than it's been a few years back, but I mean, like you said, it's kind of stagnant. It's not like booming.
I want to say to our audience that I know we've strayed from Bitcoin. We've strayed quite a bit, and we're all aware of that. But at the same time, it is tangentially related, just because it's about economics and stuff. But it's also just something that's important to us, and we really do want to, make the world a better place. We really do want to encourage the good things, and we really do want to express the ways that we believe that the world will be made better. So, yeah, we've strayed a little bit, but we think it's important, so. Thanks for listening. We hope you'll join us next Thursday.